Move more, less yada yada, and blah blah blah. Today I want to address the transformative shift in my approach to assessments as a personal trainer, which once consumed me an assessment for 2 to 4 hours of my time. Now I assess infrequently. But why? My focus has shifted to compliance, the cornerstone of active participation. If a client has a focus and they come in and they say, my knee hurts, well, we know the area where we want to begin movement. I don't want to shift their focus and say, we should really look at your big toe, or we should really look at your hip. First thing I want to do is intensify their participation and go with their flow of attention. Show me how your knee moves. Show me when it hurts. Show me when it doesn't hurt. So I choose to start where I believe it to be most important. So I ask all of you, what captures your attention? Would you want someone to tell you to stop focusing on that area? I believe that I need to get healthy by eating X. Would you want somebody to say, no, that's not it. Go over here. Would you want somebody to say, you don't need to exercise every day. You just need to sleep better? Or would you be more willing to follow the person who could help you with the problem that you wanted to solve? You want to eat better? Here are a couple tips. Let's try it out. You want to sleep better? Here's the best pillow when you're spending this amount of money. You want to exercise your knee? Here's the best exercise for your knee in this situation based on it hurting when you do X and it feeling better when you do Y. Who would you be more willing to follow? What problem burns within you to be solved? So begin there. Begin here, wherever you are, and move from here to there, towards your solution and towards the results. Often the path of exercising can be problematic. You have limitations in range of motion. You have excess muscle tension, joint problems, and disrupted movement patterns or compensations. This is where the true return on your investment lies. By aligning with the needs of those we serve, as a personal trainer serving others, I transition from selling my ideas of what you need to do to solve your movement problems to moving with what you believe is important to solve your movement problem. You never want to dampen the exercise interest or discourage active participation in movement, but rather you want to assist everyone to keep on keeping on with exercise, to keep moving. So consider a client who feels pretty good. In the with traditional wisdom about an assessment, you might suggest starting with a regular exercise assessment, but I suggest otherwise. Get them moving first. Move more, talk less. Less blah, 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 more movement. So begin with a common exercise. If they don't have a problem or a specific pain point, get them moving in a regular way. Like a supine bridge, a ball bridge, or a bridge with your back on the ball, a hip thrust. But watch them closely. And if they're shifting to one side, well then, it's not just a movement, it's a revelation. It becomes an assessment in itself. The movement becomes the assessment. The assessment becomes an opportunity for clear thinking and creativity. So maybe you want to stagger the stance. So you elevate their right leg, keeping their left leg on the floor. So it's not just about varying the workout, it's about assessing their ability to shift and balance their center of mass over a different base of support. So this isn't just an exercise. It's a learning experience that builds sensory motor competence without needing to burden them with technical jargon. Oh, you're moving your pelvis in this way or your spine that way, yada, yada, yadas. By thinking this way, simplifying it, you become more clear about your exercise objectives. You have more clear principles for guiding your choices of movements. So when you start simple and adapt the movement based on how they move versus how you want them to move. And when they're unsure of their movement pursuits, well, what do they want to do? Just return to the essentials. Keep it simple. Deadlifts, squats, torso rotations. And as they execute, you observe, you adapt, provide the sensory feedback that will bring them back into balance of their movement. Now, to deepen the problem, what we're really talking about at some level is documentation. Logging these variations and adaptations is not only a record keeping, but it's building your knowledge bank. It's about a key character trait of you as a person, about being curious, about wanting to test and expand your toolbox of assessments of what arises during a session. So with each entry, recording what you've written for variation, adaptation, or for reaching different objectives or goals and movements, your understanding goes deeper. Your guiding principles for creating personalized movement become more clear and more intuitive. You'll become more willing to take risks that feel uncertain, but you know are right based on a principled approach. This is not just about exercise. It's about understanding the human relationship to movement and fostering compliance through empathy and personalized solutions. So I leave you with this. Focus on the individuals you serve, help them solve their movement problems, and watch as your assessments transform from a procedure into a partnership, creating a reputation for results. Remember, less yada yada, more movement. And by tracking your variations and your curiosity, your guiding principles for creating personalized movements will become more clear and more intuitive. So how do you begin to do this? Well, first, you need to shift from assessments to gaining compliance. Now, compliance is what the person is already focusing on. It's easier for them to comply with. You don't have to change their mind. You don't have to teach them to become someone different. They may come in with a specific problem. I have neck tension. And in order to relieve their neck tension, they might have to move their shoulder or their upper arm differently. You don't need to assess their upper arm and all the different mechanics. You just need to watch them move and say, okay, show me when it hurts. Show me when it feels better. And then from there, try to give them personalized solutions based on your guiding principles, based on what you've learned from logging entries for what works and what didn't work in the past with other people who had very similar cases. Because what you want to suggest is how to move their shoulder in a way that alleviates with instant gratification the pain and discomfort. And from there, you can increase their capacity, but they're more likely to be compliant with the home exercise program. If they're compliant for 3 months, for 6 months, for a year, they're more likely to heal. Your reputation is more likely to expand. The person is more likely to feel better because they continue to do the movements, as opposed to telling them that they need to move their hips differently, telling them they need to move their jaw differently, giving them a bunch of yada, yada, yada. Here's the reason why this hurts. It's really not as relevant as being able to give them specific targeted advice that immediately changes their circumstance, changes how they feel about their shoulder. They're more likely to comply with those exercises at home. And this goes on to my next point. Active participation is fundamental. So start with the problem they already have that they want to do. Don't start with a stern assessment. We need to do it this way, and it needs to happen that way. Get them moving towards their problems and say, well, if it hurts now, how do you want it to move? Well, I would like it to be pain-free when I walk up and down the steps. Okay, so you need to have them in a position that bends their knee in a very specific way. Because you know that in order to walk up a step, their knee needs to be bent at first, and then they need to be able to have contact pressure to push their foot through the floor. Well, what do you have in your personal exercise knowledge base that you've used in the past for exercises with somebody in a similar circumstance that have been successful? Well, try out those best practices on this person and see if you get an easy win. But sometimes it's not that clear because they're not coming in with a problem. So maybe you start them off with a bridge with their back on a bench, and you're going into sort of a hip thrust or a position where they're bridging their hips up. And you notice when they're bridging up that they're shifting all their weight over to the right side of their body. And you think, wow, can you shift more weight into the left? Do you feel like you have weight in your left side? And they might say no. Well, rather than telling them a bunch of words and saying, oh, I'm going to tell you, move your hips this way, move your hips that way, change your foot in this position, simplify it. Make it easier for them to create the feeling. How do you do that? Well, you might elevate their right leg onto a box and keep their left foot on the floor. And what that would do is that'll shift their weight over to their left side because it's like going downhill. The body is going to put more energy closer towards the ground because the right leg's so high, they would have to lift their hips higher. So as long as they didn't lift their hips higher and the box wasn't so much higher than where their pelvis was, it should help them naturally shift their weight over to that left side. So if they have a problem, start there. But if they don't, start with deadlifts or squats or torso rotation. And then from there, you might just need to look at, well, as I'm looking at this movement, how could they be moving better? And create a concise explanation that says, okay, do you feel more weight in your left leg or not? And let them have that experience. And you note these observations and you feed it back to them. And you say, well, where do you feel what you feel? And those are sensations. And you're trying to increase their motor movement. So they have to first feel it before they can use it. So you're trying to generate situations where you can help them to be successful. And this leads to my next point. You can only help them to be successful to the degree that you remember what you've done before. That's why you want to expand your toolbox of best practices based on what you've done because you're recording it, you're logging it. So a curiosity-driven approach to movement is really about logging your entries from your sessions, logging your variations. So it's not just a battle of compliance or assessment, or starting off where their problems are, or if they have no burning problems, starting off with simple movements. But as you start with any of these, and it just so happens we use the example of a bridge, you know how to follow a line of inquiry because you have guiding principles that help you in an uncertain time to make a good decision. And that would be the point for logging your entries, tracking change, and not getting burdened with the yada, 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 the blah, 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 a bunch of assessments, a bunch of technical jargon. Get to moving, get to exercising, start with what they're already focusing on. If they don't have a burning focus, start with one of the key fundamental movements. And then, as you're watching them move, use that to a certain degree as an informal assessment and start to be curious about what can you feel in your body and what can't you? And start to come from a place, one of my overarching guiding principles is generate the feeling for them. Because if they can feel it, they can most likely move it. If they can't move it, an assumption I start with is they probably can't feel it. And so I verify that through key questions. So thank you for paying attention to this. Move more, yes, less yada, 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 less blah, blah, blah. My name is Dominic Sessa. I'm interested in helping people in sort of a quarterly time frame with an assessment of some sort for what they would like to focus on and get better, what's their aspirational style of movement, and giving you suggestions for reprogramming. And what I'm also passionate about is utilizing Notion for tracking and organizing exercise sessions and tracking your exercise behaviors and movement behaviors so you can make more informed decisions. You can check me out on Instagram or YouTube. Hope to hear from you, and I hope you guys take good care. So drop me a line for this video, drop me a comment below, or if you're watching this on Instagram or another place, please send me a message. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll do my best to answer them. Take good care.